There's something about media about fantastical boarding schools that really captures the imaginations of a lot of people. Who could ever forget their first time stepping into Owl House, Little Witch Academia, and of course the granddaddy of them all, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
Think again. Tell him who's taking those medals home.
The Jazz! The Jazz! The Jazz! The Jazz! The Jazz! What the?
Ready, boys? It's jazz time!
However, while we've seen all of that explored through other types of media, there's not all that many games in that area. So naturally, along comes the indie studio Happy Ray Games to create Ikenfell, a tactical RPG about the titular school for magic kids released in October of last year. I heard a lot of buzz around this game for its queer representation, and honestly, if you take one look at this channel, you can probably tell that I'm all about that shit. So let's see what Ikenfell is all about. The game starts and we take control of Marit, a young girl whose sister Safina has gone missing while enrolled at Eichenfeld. Marit never had the same aptitude for magic as her sister, and just going off the first few moments alone, you can tell that's a pretty big point of contention between them. Before we have much time to think on it though, Marit gets ambushed by these shadowy ghosts telling her to turn back. Being surrounded, Marit has no choice but to fight, and the results are, yeah... Before they have a chance to toss her out though, Marit feels a surge inside of her, and out of nowhere, becomes imbued with the power of fire magic. With this, she's quickly able to take out her attackers, but this still raises a lot of questions. Where did this power come from? What's going on in Eichenfeld, and how does it all relate to Safina's disappearance? From here, you'll explore the school as it's under lockdown, fighting off monsters, and teaming up with some of the students. The overworld gameplay is mostly centered around exploration and puzzle solving. It's pretty cool. There's a nice sense of progression with more of the school opening up as you go along, and while a few of them definitely overstay their welcome and feel a bit like padding, the puzzles are generally pretty solid. They're the kind that require a good bit of thought, but always give enough information to the player to eventually be able to put two and two together. Some of them even use their environments in some really striking and creative ways, like this one really pretty nighttime sequence where you have to follow the light of these fireflies hopping between street lamps. It fucking rules. As for the game's battle system, it's absolutely brilliant. For starters, there are no random encounters, opting instead to have enemies roaming around the overworld Earthbound style, which is always appreciated. There's not much in the way of grinding either. XP is shared by all party members whether they're in the battle or not, and enemies are placed around the map in such a way that you'll never have to go too out of your way to prepare for an especially difficult boss. The battles themselves are tactics-based, taking place on a small 3x12 grid. While this is a game all about magic, there's actually no MP system at all. In fact, there's no standard attack option either. Instead, each of your party members has their own unique selection of spells to use in battle. While this can be jarring at first, it ends up giving the player a lot of creative freedom with their strategies. I was always really excited whenever I got a new spell after a level up because it meant I had another strategic element to experiment with. And with 6 different party members all offering completely different playstyles, there's a lot of room for that. The game also uses timed mechanics similar to the Mario and Luigi games. These further liven up the battles by adding tactile engagement to keep you on your toes, as well as another layer to the risk and reward system at play. See, some of the attacks' timing can be noticeably harder to gauge, which creates a lot of new questions to consider as you work out your strategies. Do you go with the attack you know you can reliably pull off, or do you take a chance on the harder one for a bigger payoff? Do you want to use your turn preparing your team against that one attack you swear is impossible to block, or should you hit them with as much force as you can in hopes of killing them before they even get the chance? There's dozens of ways to go about any battle, and it can be really exciting. What's less exciting, however, are the boss fights. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not all bad. I actually thought the first one was pretty cool. Marie might be able to defend herself now, but she's still new to all this magic stuff. So instead of fighting them head on, you have to use their own strategy against them, destroying her minions and causing them to explode on them to deal some real damage. This is such a clever way of playing with the game's mechanics to create something almost like a puzzle, finding and exploiting the weakness in the enemy. And it's a shame that this is basically the only time something that cool happens. A lot of the bosses use virtually identical strategies, with the main difference being their ever-increasing health pools, which... What sucks is that there's one other boss early on that teases a really interesting idea. You have to stall this weird mutated potion monster while the alchemy teacher concocts an explosive strong enough to destroy it. I like this idea a lot because, again, it communicates how you're still just young and inexperienced at this point. It makes it feel like you're really betting against the odds here and working with what you have to manage to take down this really powerful foe. But then the explosive just doesn't work, and you just beat the monster by yourself. And, like, it's fine. The game's combat is always fun, but it's hard not to feel disappointed when it had the potential to be so much more. It wouldn't be so bad if they didn't drag on for so damn long. A lot of them have multiple phases too, which means that even when you think it's finally over, it turns out that at best you just hit the halfway point. It's not very fun, and can really hold up the story during moments where I'm just wanting it to move on. Despite that and a few other pacing issues, though, Ikenfell's story is very well executed. The way you slowly peel through it, layer by layer, revealing a web of messy personal drama tightly intertwined with massive conspiracies that go far beyond what Marie could have expected. It gets kind of dark, and it's captivating stuff. And all of this while engaging in plenty of classic magical school hijinks, of course. I mean, after all, who doesn't love, that one episode of Bert and Ernie? I'm kidding around, but these clashing tones actually add a lot to the game. It's pretty charming and reminds me a lot of cartoons like Gravity Falls or Amphibia, where an overarching mystery plot is carried along through lighter episodic adventures. Like you've got the episode where the gang have to fight this silly monster who's stealing stuff from the school, or where they have to beat the gym teacher at her own game to convince her to help them, or when they have to learn to cope with the deeply rooted trauma that comes from being raised by unloving and abusive parents. You know, the works. It all comes together really nicely. These smaller moments with the characters helping you get to know them and, thus, helping you care more about them and seeing their story through to the end. It definitely helps that the main cast are all extremely likable and well-defined with their own unique look, personality, and history, which makes them easily distinguishable and great to watch bouncing off of each other. My personal favorite is Gilda. She's basically like if Vegeta was an adorable disaster lesbian. Her whole arc about reluctantly learning that she doesn't need validation from others to cover her insecurities really hit close to home for me as someone who struggles with the same. Plus her bombastic personality is just always fun to watch. Admittedly, I did kind of feel like she didn't get enough focus in the story after finally joining the party, but for the most part, the game does a solid job at giving all 6 of the party members plenty of time to shine. I'm also definitely biased there because I just love Gilda, man. The wonderful characterization isn't just in cutscenes either. Each party member's role and playstyle in battle heavily reflects their personalities on a deeper level than most other games I've played. Take Petronella, for example. They're super insecure and shy around others, always afraid to approach even their closest friends in fear of ending up getting hurt. As a result, most of their attacks only work from a distance, as if to minimize confrontation with enemies. Same goes for their healing spells, which only heal the other party members, as if Petronella feels they don't deserve to be healed themselves. However, as the game goes on and they grow more confident in themselves, they start learning spells that actually work in close range, as well as ones that heal themselves along with their teammates. It's a really clever and thoughtful way of fleshing out a character's growth through the game's mechanic, giving them a lot more real weight than just telling us about it through dialogue. The overworld is also littered with plenty of neat side characters who make the game's world feel that much more believable. Their dialogue is written with enough nuance and charm that they really feel like their own people whose lives exist beyond just telling the player where to go or whatever. Some of them are just really funny too. Like, I love this one kid who just really likes rats. Rat City, baby! The visuals are all really nice too. Vibrant colors, expressive character portraits, and some really creative creature designs. It looks pretty great, and like I said earlier, wouldn't feel too out of place next to some of the stuff currently airing on Disney XD or Cartoon Network. Oh yeah, on that note, Ivy and Surashu, the series composers for Steven Universe, actually provide the game's soundtrack, and they do a pretty fantastic job as always, bringing a lot of personality and appeal to the game's overall presentation while also setting the tone for some of the more impactful moments. The playful elegance of their trademark sound is here in full effect. However, the heavier electronics are a lot more subdued, opting for a more organic and occasionally almost rootsy feeling sound palette. While it's maybe not exactly what one would go in expecting from them, it goes over really well. There's this charming timelessness to the game's setting and aesthetic that the soundtrack really helps capture. Don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of chiptune synths to go around, but they often have this fluttery playing style that makes them feel really whimsical and, well, magical. Even with the lighter feel though, this game's not without its share of bangers by any means. Like, the main battle theme, In This Together, is this super dynamic up-tempo track that I just never get tired of hearing. It's great. Some other standouts for me are Once Upon a Universe, a beautifully delicate progressive piece. And the Snatchers theme, which is just so good. There's also a handful of songs with vocal features, some of which get looped a bit too much for their own good, but they're still pretty cute. I was happy to hear Samus show up on Ima's theme. It was kind of jarring hearing her in an actual game at first, but she gives a really lovely performance that works super well with the scene it's in. Though, with that said, I wasn't really a fan of the section of the game where the instrumental for it became the main battle theme. Not that it's bad, but it's not a song that can be repeated that much without getting grating. The song's bright and uplifting tone also doesn't really fit the more somber part of the game it's attached to. It isn't too long before we're back to the main battle theme though, so I guess I can't complain too much. Okay, we've got everything else out of the way. Let's talk about gay shit. Most of the plot-important characters, including the entirety of the main party, are all a part of the LGBT community, a fact that the game never once shies away from, and that's really refreshing. Media where characters' queerness is either used as a shocking plot twist or delegated to blink-and-you-miss-it moments of tokenization is so common, it's almost surreal seeing this game not pull any punches with it. It's also nice just seeing a queer story that doesn't feel the need to use queerness as a vehicle for suffering. Characters' identities are never made into a point of conflict. Hell, the only instance of misgendering in the whole game is done on accident, immediately apologized for, and serves the purpose of communicating to the player that Rook, who uses he/him pronouns, is non-binary. Don't get me wrong, art that discusses the challenges queer people face is totally valid and worth having. Hell, I'd be down for a magical adventure game where me and the girls go to beat the shit out of transphobes. But having a game where they can be such a focus without making their identities all about struggle is just really nice. Our suffering is a part of us, but we're also a lot more than that, and I think this game really understands that. And the idea of queer kids growing up playing games like this, and seeing themselves reflected in these characters so positively it just makes me happy. This game is just so fucking sweet, dude. Sure, I've got my issues with it, like I've said, but I still loved pretty much every second of this. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's into quirky indie RPGs like this, as well as other cartoon nerds who are as into this sort of vibe as I am. I also feel like it's worth mentioning the ridiculous lengths they went for accessibility here. There's tons of options to tinker with flashing lights, difficulty settings, and even a really thorough content warning system that the player can customize to their liking. It's pretty cool. Ikenfell is a really great little game, and I'm excited to see where Happy Ray Games goes from here. That's gonna be it for now, though. See ya!